So it gives me pleasure, councillors, and executive staff and those joining us in the gallery, and a special mention of Michael Brockman from the Gunnedah Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining and listening in to the council meeting, ordinary council meeting for April. It gives me pleasure to open our meeting at 4:40, and I'd like to acknowledge the fact that we have Councillor Luke joining us virtually as well to our meeting. I'd like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, and also pay my respects to elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal community members who may be present or listening to this audio tape. If I could now please ask all to be upstanding for prayer. Eternal God, our loving Father, we come to thee this day in the name of Jesus Christ, who is the lover of our souls and the saviour of all mankind. May we feel his love and respond to it. May his spirit shine in lives that are darkened by worry, doubt, or fear. Strengthen and guide those who are trying to do what is right. Make it plain to them. Make us more mindful of the needs of our fellow men and less absorbed in selfish concerns, that Christ may approve and bless what we do here this day. We ask these blessings in his name. Amen. Please be seated. Now move to our bereavements between the 16th of March and the 19th of April of those that we've lost in our community. And as a community, we mourn the loss of Alicia Ann Knott, Wayne Allen Sanderson, Stephen Roy Baker, Delise Elaine Highland, Nigel Scott Gardner, Ronald John Smith, Mary Doring, Mary Christina Lightfoot, Bruce William Hosey, Elizabeth Lillian Brady, Ronald James Cook, and Christina Janet Todd. If I could please ask councillors, executive team members, friends in the gallery to all please be upstanding for 1 minute silence as we pay our respect to the deceased and we extend our condolences to the family of those. Please be seated. Now move on to apologies and those that are present. We have one leave of absence request from Councillor Fuller, who is not able to attend our council meeting today. All other executive team and elected members are either here in person or virtually joining the council meeting. So now I'd like to call for elected member to move that absent request for leave of absence. Thank you. Councillor Luke has moved and it's seconded by Councillor Hoddle. And I'll put that motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. We'll move on to confirmation of the previous minutes, and that is in relation to the meeting that was held on Wednesday, the 15th of March. And I'd like to call for an elected member to move a motion that they be drawn an accurate record. Thank you, Councillor Hook, seconded by Councillor McGrath. Now I'll call for an elected member who might like to ask a question or speak against the accuracy of the motion. Being no debate, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. In accordance with section 233A of the Local Government Act 1993, councillors are reminded of their oath or affirmation of office and their obligations under Council's Code of Conduct to disclose and appropriately manage conflicts of interest. And now we'll move to conflicts of interest, and I'll call for any elected member or executive team member who might like to declare an interest in relation to the ordinary meeting. We have received 2 declarations from Councillor O'Keefe, being first one in relation to item 13.3 Gunnedah athletics fees. It's a pecuniary declaration, and the reason is the employer has sponsored Gunnedah athletics for matters relevant to this item and will be leaving the chambers. The second is in relation to item 17.1 Gunnedah Koala Century update, and it's pecuniary. And the reason is the employer has sponsored the project and will be leaving the chambers for discussion and debate and determination. I'll now call for any further declarations of interest in relation to the business paper. Councillor
Mr. Mayor, I have an interest with the item concerning Gunnedah Show. My wife and daughter are members of the show committee.
Item 13.4. And that item 13.4 relates to the request for fee waiver for Gunnedah Show. And you are declaring a significant non-pecuniary or less than significant non-pecuniary?
I may as well go significant.
Thank you. You will be leaving the chambers, and the reason for your declaration is that your wife and daughter, did you say?
My wife and daughter
are involved.
are members of the Gunnedah Show committee.
Are members of the Gunnedah Show committee.
Now, I'd just like clarification on that. Am I able to stay in the room while that's being debated, and then I have to move out while the vote?
So it's if your declaration is determined that you're unable to vote, then you should leave the chamber, not be part of the discussion. I'll now call for any further declarations of interest in relation to the business paper. Second, third and final call, no further declarations. Thank you. We'll now move forward under the next item, which is community presentations. And item 9, Merrill Minute, and item 10, General Manager's reports. There are no business for the month of April. So we'll move straight into item 11, which is the Director of Corporate and Community Services reports. And I'll call on Ms. Didworthy to detail her recommendation, starting with the first item, 11.1, investments. Thank you, Ms. Didworthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. This report is presented in accordance with clause 212 of the Local Government General Regulation 2021 and provides details on the cash and investments held by Council as at 31 March 2023. The report notes that $101 million was held as at the 31st of March and that all investments were held in accordance with Council's investment policy limits.
Thank you, Ms. Didworthy. I now call for elected member who might like to move the recommendation to become a motion. Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe.
I'm happy to move.
Happy to move, seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor O'Keefe, as the mover of the motion, you wish to speak to it.
Oh, look, it's I'll take up the baton of moving this motion and saying that it's excellent to see the interest rates moving in the right direction after spending years of making the opposite comment. Rather than ask a question of the director without notice, I might ask that we arrange a workshop for a future Wednesday to review or discuss the investments policy. It's been 2 or 3 years now since the current one was enacted, and it's probably worthwhile just having a conversation about how it's going and what we can or can't move around within it.
I'll now call for elected member who may like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Moses, as the seconder of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Will that be the case then? If there's no debate, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. We'll move on to item 11.2, outstanding resolution register, and I'll hand back to Ms. Didworthy to detail that recommendation to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. This report provides details on Council's outstanding resolutions from these meetings. 32 resolutions are in the process of being actioned, and all remaining Council resolutions have been completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Didworthy. Before I open up for debate, I'll call for elected member to move the recommendation. I'll call for a elected member to move the recommendation. Thank you. Councillor Hoddle has moved. Councillor Hooker has seconded the motion. Councillor Hoddle, as a mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
I'll now ask if there's an elected member who may like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Luke.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If I could ask the Director, Mr Johns, about item 8.11/20 with respect to the electronic signage. It's got here that the matter will progress when the economic development team leader has been recruited. Now, I think we actually have got that position filled. Can the Director give an update on whether we're moving on that particular item?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Luke, and through you, Mr Mayor. We don't actually have a team leader in economic development at this stage. We have recruited a manager of economy and growth. We're in the process of attempting to attract a team leader, and once that person's been recruited, we'll aim to progress those to electronic signs.
Thank you.
Councillor Hook is the seconder of the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Are there any further questions or comments, councillors, before I put the motion? Being no questions, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. Thank you, Ms Didworthy, for your contribution. We'll now move on to the Director of Planning and Environmental Services reports, and I'll call on Mr Johns to detail his recommendations, starting with item 12.1, Business Partner Program Round 3, 2022 to 23. Thank you, Mr Johns.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and through you, councillors. As you would have read in this report, it seeks endorsement of the recommendation of the Business Partner Program Advisory Group, which is made up of community members and councillors. And that recommendation is that an allocation of $13,806 be allocated to 4 businesses outlined in the report, and that relates to round 3 of the Business Partner Program for this financial year.
Thank you, Mr Johns. I'll now call for, thank you, Councillor Hook has moved that recommendation to become a motion and seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Hook, as the mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, I don't think so. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Call for elected member who may like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Moses, as the second of the motion, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
If there's no questions, no debate, councillors, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. Next item is item 12.2, request for inclusion of the name FIDES in Council's naming of public infrastructure and public acknowledgement policy, and I'll hand to Mr Johns to detail that recommendation.
Thanks again, Mr Mayor, and through you, councillors, this report seeks inclusion of the name FIDES within the public infrastructure and public acknowledgement policy, and in particular the name register associated with that policy. As you would have read in the report, Mr Kenneth FIDES made a significant contribution to Gunnedar's retail services and art sectors.
Thank you, Mr Johns. Thank you. Councillor Hook has moved the recommendation to become a motion, and do I have a seconder? Councillor Hoddle. Councillor Hook, as the mover of the motion, who wishes to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm delighted to move this motion because a very, very well-known character in the past in this community, and I think the name is very, very worthy of being put on the register.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Hoddle, as a seconder to the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
There's no further questions or debate, councillors. I put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion carried. Now move on to item 12.3, nomination for section 356 small grant panel council representatives, and I'll hand back to Mr Johns.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and through you, councillors, this report relates or seeks an allocation of councillors to sit on those section 356 small grants panels.
Thank you, Mr Johns. Before I call for anyone to move any motions or second them, I'll call for nominations. Firstly, for 3 elected members who will be on the 356 grants panel for the community and sports. We'll start with community and sports. I'll call for nominations. Councillor MacArthur. Would you like to nominate somebody? Calling for nominations. You'd like to nominate yourself? I assume you'll accept that. So that's one. I'll now call for any further nominations. 3 positions. Councillor McGrath.
I'm going to jump on that bandwagon and also nominate myself.
Right, and you'll accept?
I accept.
Awesome. There's 2. Do I have a third nomination?
I
Can I
nominate.
nominate councillor Fuller?
Councillor Fuller is an apology at tonight's council meeting, would be unable to accept. What I might do is call for any further nominations first. Councillor Luke from those in attendance, and see if we fill the position.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Councillor Moses, you nominated?
Councillor Hook.
Councillor Hook. Councillor Hook, do you accept the nomination for one of the 3 positions in the community and sporting panel? Thank you. We have 3 nominations, Councillor McGrath, Councillor MacArthur and Councillor Hook. Are there any further nominations for one of those positions? No further nominations? Congratulations, all 3. We'll now move on to the Arts and Cultural panel, and I'll call for nominations, also 3 positions there for elected members. Councillor McGrath, you would like to nominate?
Can I nominate Councillor Hoddle, Councillor MacArthur and myself?
I'd like to receive, if others would like to nominate. Look, I can accept all those 3 and we'll call for further nominations. Councillor Hoddle, would you accept the nomination? Please turn your microphone on for the purpose of
Yes, I
those
would.
joining virtually.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. You would, thank you. Councillor MacArthur, would you accept the nomination?
I do accept, thank you.
Councillor McGrath, do you accept your nomination?
I do.
I'll now call for any further nominations. We have 3, but I will call for any further nominations. Second, third call, any further nominations? Congratulations, Councillor MacArthur, Councillor McGrath and Councillor Hoddle. Now, we have the names. Councillors, I'd like to call for an elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion. Councillor Moses has moved, seconded by Councillor MacArthur. Councillor Moses, you wish to speak to this motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion. Ask a question. Councillor MacArthur, as a second to the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There's no further debate, then councillors, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Call that unanimously supported. Thank you, all of those elected members who have chosen to serve on those committees. Now moving on to item 12.4, development application number 2023-006, construction of new farm building, and I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail that recommendation.
Thanks again, Mr. Mayor, and through you, councillors. As you would have read in this report, it relates to a farm building proposed at 125 Pownell Road at Malawi. The reason it's before you is that the applicant has sought a departure from a development control standard relating to primary setback setback of the building from a primary road. As you would have seen in the report, the DCP generally requires 200 metres. The applicant seeks 100 metres in this instance. And as you would have seen in the site plan that shows an aerial photograph, it's logical that it go in that location. So that departure is supported by staff.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Councillors, before I call for a move of the recommendation, I'm just going to make you all aware when it comes time to vote, it will be by show of hands, being a planning matter. Now I'll call for a move of the recommendation to become the motion. Thank you, Councillor Hook, and seconded by Councillor McGrath. Sorry, yes, McGrath. As the move of the motion, Councillor Hook, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I need to congratulate the director in making a very, very sensible recommendation.
I now call for elected member who may like to ask a question or speak against this motion, please. Councillor McGrath is seconded to the motion. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, councillors, by show of hands, right or left, doesn't matter. All in favour? And those against? I'll call that carried. Now we'll move on to the next item, 12.5, application from modify development consent number 2019-019.002. And I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail that recommendation.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, again, and through you, councillors, this modification relates to a development at the Gunnedah Greyhound Track. And as you would have read in the report, proposes to introduce an additional stage It proposes a reduction in car parking spaces on site and also an amendment to plans. The primary reason that's before you, again, councillors, is because you assessed or determined the original application. So therefore modifications need to come back to you. Yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. A call for elected member to move the recommendation to become the motion. Thank you, councillor MacArthur, and seconded by councillor Hoddle. Was that your hand? Yep. Councillor Hoddle has seconded the motion. Councillor McGrath has moved the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
Councillor MacArthur, no, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Apologies, councillor MacArthur. Too many Macs. Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion? Councillor Luke.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to ask a question of the director, can he just briefly explain the possible impacts of less parking? I think even though it's not every day of the week this facility gets used, parking at times can actually be quite an issue there with unformed roads at the sides, mud, whatever.
Thanks, councillor Luke, and through you. I guess the proponent has put forward a fairly solid argument that even though there's requirements for parking like on a ratio basis on area of land, the way people use facilities such as this in this day and age means that there's potentially going to be less parking on the site. You know, due to drink driving laws and that type of thing, things have changed. People don't necessarily drive to the Greyhound track, have a few beers and then drive home. They get alternate transport to the facility. So on that basis, that the departure is supported by staff. Does that answer your question, councillor Luke?
Well, I suppose so. Just further to that, if I may, though, through you, Mr Mayor. So for emergency vehicles such as ambulances, veterinary vehicles, whatever, stewards and the like, there you can feel that there's a strong enough argument to which that there's adequate for that purpose.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, I do.
Thank you.
Councillor Hoddle has seconded the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Are there any further questions or elected member who'd like to speak against the motion before I put the motion? No, or again, by show of hands, all of those in favour? That's those against? One against and the rest for, so I'll call that carried. Murray. So you, sorry, councillor O'Keefe, to clarify, you were voting for the motion.
For clarity's sake, I was voting for the motion. I was just slow.
Okay, so unanimously supported. Thank you. We'll move on to item 12.6, planning proposal to amend the Gunnedah Local Environmental Plan 2012, 170 Bushes Lane, Gunnedah, and I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail that recommendation.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and through you, councillors, as you would have read, this report relates to a draft planning proposal and also a draft planning agreement relating to 170 Bushes Lane. The subject site is a touch under 17 hectares. And the proposal is to rezone the land from AU4 primary production small lots to R5 large lot residential. The purpose of the planning agreement in this instance is that this development represents out of sequence development in accordance with council's current land use strategy, which means that if this developer was prepared to wait until 2029 when the works are scheduled to do the upgrade of Gullens Reservoir, they'd be able to potentially service this allotment without having to contribute to the infrastructure. So this developer and the developer for the next matter, item 7 of my reports, has, I guess, agreed to enter into this planning agreement so that they can get their lots on the market before 2029, and that's their prerogative. We have developed the planning proposal with a well-known solicitor that does a lot of that type of work, and the draft planning agreement has been endorsed by the proponents in this instance.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. I'll now call for elected member to move the recommendation to become the motion. Thank you, councillor Moses, seconded by councillor MacArthur. Councillor Moses, as the mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been well documented in the report.
Thank you. Do I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against this motion? Councillor MacArthur, as the seconder to the motion, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any further questions or debate, councillors? Just before I put this motion, I'd just like to say how pleasing it is to see the demand being so high in our community. We are truly in a prosperous situation as a show at the moment, with people wanting to move and the demand being so high that an opportunity like this is before us. So I think that's absolutely fantastic, and in no small piece, it's because of the actions of a very proactive council, in my view, that we're in this situation. Councillors, in saying that, by show of hands, if I could, all those in favour of the motion? That's unanimously supported. Thank you. Now moving on to item 12.7, which is planning proposal to amend the Gunnedah Local Environmental Plan 2012 for 210 Bushes Lane, and I'll hand back to Mr. Johns.
Thanks again, Mr. Mayor, and through you, councillors. As with the previous report, this report relates to 210 Bushes Lane, which is immediately to the south of the aforementioned land. This is a much bigger parcel of land, being 60.5 hectares. Exactly the same as the previous report. There is a proposal to rezone the land from RU4 production small lots to R5 large lot residential. And again, in order to ensure that this development can be serviced, the proponent has agreed to enter into a planning agreement in order that work be done at this time rather than in 2029, which is when it would be scheduled to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Call for an elected member. Thank you. Councillor Hook has moved the recommendation to become the motion, and seconded by councillor McGrath. Councillor Hook has moved the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor McGrath is the seconder of the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No questions, no more debate. Councillors, then I'll put the motion all by show of hands. All in favour? Unanimously supported also. Thank you, Mr. Johns, for your contribution. We'll now move on to the Director of Infrastructure Services reports, and I'll call on Mr. Bartlett to detail his recommendations, starting with item 13.1, which is Clifton Road upgrade progress status. Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to advise Council of the current status of the Clifton Road upgrade project with respect to the works completed, budget remaining, works remaining, grant funding arrangements, and the funding allocation required to complete the second coat seal in the 2023-24 financial year, having acquitted the grant funding arrangements in 2022-23.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll call for elected member to move that recommendation to become the motion. Thank you, Councillor McGrath, seconded by Councillor Luke. Councillor McGrath, as the mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor Luke, as the seconder of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Be the case, councillors, I will now put this motion. All in favour? Against? Call that unanimously supported. Next, we'll move on to item 13.2, Kelvin Road upgrade progress status, and I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail that recommendation too. Apologies, Mr. Bartlett. Apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to advise Council of the current status of the Kelvin Road upgrade project with respect to works completed, budget remaining, works remaining, grant funding arrangements, and the cost to complete the works in April 2023, subject to contractor availability and availability of sealing aggregate.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Now call for an elected member to move that recommendation to become the motion. Thank you, Councillor McGrath, seconded by Councillor Hook. Councillor McGrath has moved the motion. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Hook, as the seconder of the motion, do you wish to speak?
Only to observe that it's a great body of work and it'd be great to see it completed.
There are no further questions or comments, councillors. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. The next item, we have a declaration of interest from councillor O'Keefe, who is leaving if we could just have the record show that councillor O'Keefe has removed himself from the chambers. And this item is item 13.3, Gunnedah Athletics Centre fees. I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to bring to council's attention Gunnedah Athletic Centre's request for financial assistance for capital works improvements to Donnelly Fields, a fee waiver for a period of 5 to 10 years, and a fee reduction for the 2022-23 seasonal charge due to flooding.
And clarity that your recommendation is to decline the request for reduction in annual hire and to approve a credit.
Yes, that's correct.
Elected members, I'd now like to call on one of you to please move this recommendation to become a motion. Thank you, councillor McGrath, seconded by councillor Moses. Councillor McGrath has moved the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Have elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor MacArthur.
I would like to propose an amendment to the motion.
Can we have it?
That we, one as written, for two, however, that the credit amount is the hire fee, the seasonal and the access fee totaling $2,315. So instead, for Paige's benefit, instead of $964.80, $2,315. So that's being 100% of the 2022-2023 seasonal and annual charges due to loss of access from flooding. 3, that council work with Gunnedah Athletic Centre to secure the required funding via grants or other sponsorship opportunities and complete the capital works of surfacing the long jump run-ups. And 4, that a report is brought to the July 2023 council meeting updating the progress of item 3. So I think that, it's been quite unfortunate for the Gunnedah Athletics Centre.
Before you speak to the motion, councillor MacArthur, if you could please maybe bring your motion wording up to the screen so we can have that typed in. We can have that copy. Once it's typed and you confirm that it's accurate, I'll call for a seconder to your amendment and we'll debate the amendment before we come back to the motion. Thank you, Ms Nyes. Councillor MacArthur, can I please ask that you read the motion as you see on the screen and confirm the amended version is in line with your intent?
Mr Chair, I can confirm that's correct.
Okay, we'll just get the numbering correct here and a little bit of the formatting, and then I'll call for a seconder to this amendment before we start debate. So council, start thinking if you'd like to second this amendment. Ms Nyes, we might just put before the first item of the word amendment and bring that forward. Councillor has been moved by Councillor MacArthur. Councillors, you all comfortable with the wording? You understand before I call for a seconder to the amendment? Yes, you must be. I'll call for a seconder to the amendment. A second call for a seconder to the amendment.
Mr Mayor, if I may, I think we're sort of at a bit of an impasse here. If I can foreshadow a further amendment.
Well, at the moment, Councillor Hook, I'm about to third call. If there's no seconder to the amendment, there'll be no requirement for a foreshadow because we won't have an amendment. So councillors, for the third call for a seconder to the amendment. Third and final call, no seconder, so it lapses. There is therefore no amendment. We're back to the original motion. And I'll call for, at the moment, if we can just go back, we have a mover and a seconder. We've had, of the original motion was Councillor McGrath and the seconder was Councillor Moses. Councillor McGrath, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes. Mr. Bartlett at the Gundar Athletics Centre, they call themselves, have mentioned that they've sort of found it quite difficult to get council to do their bit in terms of helping maintain that facility. Could you just elaborate a little bit in terms of our operational planning and the way we approach that?
Thank you, Councillor McGrath, for the question, and through you, Mr Mayor. Council maintains that area and those facilities to the standard it's able to within the budget that's provided for that purpose. And typically on an as-needed basis, spread out across the year. In terms of the line marking and other services required, that's undertaken as needed.
I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to have another crack at this. I would like to once again move an amendment along the lines of Councillor MacArthur. However, item point 1 and point 2 remain, and the point 3 and 4 that Councillor MacArthur indicated she would like to actually have them remain, and then see if we've got a second.
Councillor Hook, please be clearer. In the previous amendment, there were 4 points. You're requesting 1 and 2 remain the same, and 3 and 4 are removed in a new amendment.
In the new amendment, Mr Mayor, the officer's recommendation for item 1 and item 2 remain, and that item 3 and 4, as suggested by Councillor MacArthur, be included in the amendment.
Right, so the need to change the second item
Yes,
would come out of the previous amendment, and the original officer's report item 2 would go in, and that would be your amendment.
that would be correct.
Ms. Nyes, if we could have that, please.
One and two of the original motion stays, and then you just add 3 and 4. The amended 3 and 4. Can I just have a point of order too, Mr. Chair? Is it the case that if somebody puts up an amendment, they're not required or not allowed the opportunity to speak to it before a seconder is called?
That's my understanding of the code. There's no debate on a motion unless it's got a seconder.
No debate, but presentation of the reason behind the proposed amendment.
I'll seek clarity with the general manager. My understanding is there can be no discussion or debate unless there's a seconder to any motion or amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll just consult the code of meeting practice to make sure before we reply.
Councillor Hook, can you confirm the, we'll just need to call this amendment and moved by Councillor Hook, please. Ms. Nyes?
Sorry.
This is an amendment by Councillor Hook, right? Could we put that noted on? Right. So it's actually not the resolution, it's an amendment. We just put that wording down before item 1. What, just continue to scroll up. What's that? Oh, no, sorry, down, I mean, sorry. Where is the amendment? That's the amendment? Yeah, so we need that to be put on as, no, next line up. Yep, no. Down 1. In between 1 and council resolution. Yep. And moved by Councillor Hook. Councillor Hook, can you confirm the wording of your amendment from 1 through to 4 is correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Now call for a seconder to this amendment. Thank you, Councillor MacArthur. And we'll come back to you with your answer when it's available. Let's start the debate. Councillor Hook, we now have an amendment that we'll deal with. If it passes, it'll become the motion. Would you like to speak to your amendment, please?
Briefly, Mr. Mayor, I believe that item 1 and 2 are thoroughly sensible. The item 2, which refers to some adjustment to the fees, is appropriate because it's on a pro rata basis, and I don't think that really they need any more than that. We've got to be mindful that we have to collect fees for maintenance of the grounds, which they're being used by various sporting bodies. I am under the impression that there is some funding that is readily available to assist the athletics club in doing some capital works on the ground, i.e. the run up to the long jump area. And if that is so, then I think that council will have no trouble in working with that particular group of people who have got some funding available and be able to bring a report back to council in a timely manner. But I'd like to hand over to my seconder to elaborate on what I've just said.
Before I do, just confirmation I was correct with the code of meeting. That's confirmation I've received that it's correct, so there'll be no further debate in this council meeting, maybe a discussion you may have after. We'll now move on for any further questions or those to speak against. Councillor Luke, would you like to speak against this motion? Thank you.
I would, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a problem with the wording of item number 3 in the amended in the amendment. It's a bit too positive that funding will be secured. It says that council work with Gunnedah Athletic Centre to secure the required funding via grants or other sponsorships, and then complete the capital works of the long jump. Now, I think has to be a what if, and maybe to attempt to secure funding, and if successful, then complete the capital work. So with the permission of the mover and the seconder of the amendment, I'd be more happy to see those changes in number 3.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. This is precisely why I requested an opportunity to explain any uncertainties in the proposed amendment before a seconder was called for. I would draw your attention to 10.12 of the rules of meeting, which would have allowed me to explain the purpose behind number 3. May I do so? 10.12 says the mover of an amendment is to be given the opportunity to explain any uncertainties in the proposed amendment before a seconder is called for.
If at that time, when I called for a seconder, it was clear that there was any uncertainties, I think that would be relevant.
Look, I don't mean to debate the point, but I can answer Councillor Luke's query around the uncertainty now, if that's permissible.
I'll come to you shortly as a seconder, but firstly, I'll ask the mover of the amendment. Are you happy with the suggested word changing by Councillor Luke?
Unfortunately, I didn't fully understand what you were saying because I couldn't hear it properly, Mr. Mayor.
I'll take that as a no. Councillor MacArthur, would you like to accept the suggestion? Would you like to respond to Councillor Luke?
Oh, I'm happy to suggest the amendment or happy to consider the suggestion that Councillor Luke makes, but I don't think it's necessary because all it requires council to do is work with the Gunnedah Athletic Centre to, you can say, assist them secure the required funding. But the whole purpose of this is, my understanding is that a number of community groups already hold funding to which they could assist the Gunnedah Athletic Centre with council's assistance, acquit those funds. So I didn't expect a whole lot of debate around this. The purpose as to number 3, but the purpose for number 4 is to have the Director of Infrastructure Services come back to us in a couple of months to report on the progress of item 3. My understanding is that there's a fair bit of frustration amongst some community groups who are holding funds ready to acquit them to worthy recipients such as the Gunnedah Athletic Centre. So I don't want to delay the implementation of this resolution because things can be progressed quite significantly with the good weather we're having to enable them to carry out their activities.
So you don't accept the suggested change by Councillor Luke. So Councillor Luke, they're not accepted, the mover and the seconder. So the amendment sits as it currently is. Councillor MacArthur, would you like to speak further as a seconder to this amendment than what you already have?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any further questions or comments or elected members who'd like to speak against the amendment before I put the amendment? Be the case, then I'll put the amendment by show of hands, please. All in favour of the amendment? And those against? Councillor Luke, have you voted? You're against the motion, the amendment? I declare the amendment has passed 4 votes to 3. It now becomes the motion. So councillors, once again, if we've had the debate, it now becomes a motion. So I'll put this motion once again. All in favour of the motion? And against? I declare the motion carried. Well, now, please ask Councillor O'Keefe if he could please join us. Somebody from within the gallery, maybe? No? Yeah. Ms. Nyes, if you could have the record show that Councillor O'Keefe has rejoined the chambers. The next item is item 13.4. Councillor Hoddle has a declaration of interest and has left the chambers. If we could, Ms. Nyes, also have the record show councillor Hoddle has removed himself from the chambers for the discussion, the debate and the determination of item 13.4, request fee waiver at Gunnedah Show. And I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation before you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to present two requests to council for financial assistance from the Gunnedah Show Society in relation to the Gunnedah Show event.
And your recommendation, Mr. Bartlett?
Is that council decline the Gunnedah Show Society's request to access the water standpipe at no cost for the Gunnedah Show, and that council decline the Gunnedah Show Society's request to waive the $5,000 land rental fee for the Gunnedah Show for the 2022 year and subsequent years up to and including 2027.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll now call for elected member to move the recommendation become a motion. Councillor Moses has moved the recommendation to become the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Luke has seconded the motion. Councillor Moses is the mover of the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll call on elected member to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor O'Keefe.
Ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor. Director, has the Gunnedah Show Society requested or offered any sponsorship opportunities to Gunnedah Shire Council for the 2023 Gunnedah Show?
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe, for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. To my knowledge, the answer is no. However, I would need to confirm that definitively for councillors.
Councillor Luke, as a seconder of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We have an elected member who would like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Being no further, councillor Hook.
Only around item 1. I understand that there is a large rhino tank storage area below the new horse stables. Have they got ready access to that, number 1? And number 2, is that plumbed into the horse wash area?
Thank you, Councillor Hook, for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd need to take that question on notice.
Any further questions, councillors? For clarity, before I put the motion. Councillor Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I have some idea from the director as to the normal value of the water during the show period?
Thank you, Councillor Luke, for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. It would depend on the consumption that's used, but the charge would be the charge that's in council's user fees and charges per kilolitre for water obtained through either a metered standpipe or one of council's water refilling stations. It's I need to confirm exactly what that is per kilolitre.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, so we actually, it's very hard to put a value on that request to access the water standpipe.
Thank you, Councillor Luke, for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Any further questions, councillors, before I put the motion? Well, councillors, we have the motion in 2 parts. All of those in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. We'll now move on to Councillor Hoddle. If we could please have Councillor Hoddle encouraged to come back into the chambers. Ms. Nyes, if you could have the record show, Councillor Hoddle has rejoined the chambers. Next item is item 13.5, pesticide use notification plan, and I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail that recommendation to you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to present to council a draft updated pesticide use notification plan in attachment 1 to the report. The officer's recommendation is that the notification plan be endorsed and placed on public exhibition for a period of 28 days and then formally adopted by the council should no submissions be received. And also that council receives a further report following the conclusion of the exhibition period should any submissions be received. And following formal adoption of the pesticide use notification plan, that the policy pesticide use notification be adopted by council on the 21st of October 2015 be retired.
Thank you, Mr Bartlett. I call for Councillor Hook has moved the motion, seconded by Councillor McGrath. Councillor Hook has moved the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
A very sensible document, Mr Mayor. It's very straightforward and I commend the office for putting it together.
Thank you. Do I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against this motion?
I'd love to ask a question through you, Mr Mayor, at the risk of being a pedant. Upon reading the draft policy, I did note that the policy relates to pesticides and herbicides. Do we need to call both those things out in the nomenclature, or are pesticides the greater critter?
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe, for the question, and through you, Mr Mayor. The fact that they're covered within the document covers it. It doesn't need to be specifically notified in the title.
Councillor McGrath is the second of the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Are there any further questions or comments, councillors, before I put this motion? Being none, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. The next item is item 13.6, 2023 Local Government New South Wales Water Management Conference. And before I call for Mr Bartlett to detail the recommendation, there is a requirement within this report for nomination for an elected member to attend this water conference, and I'll call for nominations for that position. Councillor Hook.
I'd like to nominate yourself. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you for the nomination, and I would love to accept holding the position of Chair of Region 11 of the Murray-Darling Association and many other water areas through joint organisation, country mayors and so forth. It's a very important aspect, and I think this conference would be one that we will benefit from attending. I'm happy to accept the nomination and now call for any further nominations for the elected member to represent council at the water conference in Parkes. Second call, third and final call, any further nominations? Being none, I'll accept that, and the motion will read that council resolve for Councillor Chaffey to attend the 2023 Local Government New South Wales Water Management Conference to be held in Parkes from 26th to the 28th of June 2023. I'll hand back to Mr Bartlett to detail that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to invite council to nominate a councillor to attend the 2023 Local Government New South Wales Water Management Conference being held in Parkes from Monday the 26th of June to Wednesday the 28th of June.
Thank you, Mr Bartlett. I now call for a move of the recommendation. Councillor Hook, seconded by Councillor McGrath. Councillor Hook has moved the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I've elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor McGrath is the second to the motion just to speak.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
There's no further debate, then I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. Moving on, item 13.7, Showground Working Group. Oh, you've declared on this? Okay, I don't think the record showed you had a declaration of interest in relation to item 13.7. Ms. Nyes, if we could go back to declaration. Okay, we'll add it to the declaration now. Thank you. Item 13.7, Showground Working Group meeting minutes. Showground Working Group meeting minutes. I'm not sure of the declaration. Same. Okay. Yep. So the same. Yep. So Ms. Nyes, if you could have the record show, Councillor Hoddle has left the chambers for the discussion, debate and determination of this item, and I'll now hand to Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is for information sharing and acknowledgement of the Showground Working Group meeting minutes. The minutes of the Showground, the officer's recommendation is that the minutes of the Showground Working Group meeting held on the 20th of March 2023 be received and noted.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Call for an elected member to move the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Moses, seconded by Councillor MacArthur. Councillor Moses, as I move the motion, you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
An elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor MacArthur, as a seconder of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Being no debate, no discussion, no questions, I'm going to put this motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. Could you please ask Councillor Hoddle to rejoin us in the chambers? Ms. Nyes, if you could have the record show Councillor Hoddle has returned into the chambers. Councillors, the next item is item 13.8, 2023 Local Roads Congress. There is a call in the recommendation for a nomination for an elected member to be representative to attend this conference at Parliament House on the 5th of June in partnership with the Director of Infrastructure Services. And I'll now call for nominations for elected member to attend.
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor, may I recommend or nominate you to attend the Local Roads Congress?
I'm happy to accept that nomination, but also very happy for other nominations to come forward. And I'll now call for any further nominations. Second call, any third call, any further nominations? Being none, I'll accept. Thank you. So the recommendation now reads that council endorse the attendance of Councillor Chaffey to accompany the Director of Infrastructure Services to attend the 2023 Local Roads Congress to be held at New South Wales Parliament House on Monday, the 5th of June, 2023. And I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail any further information on the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to inform councillors of the 2023 New South Wales Local Roads Congress to be held at New South Wales Parliament House on the 5th of June 2023 and to determine a councillor attendee.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Now call for a mover of that recommendation become the motion. Thank you, Councillor Hook, seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Hook has moved the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
I think there's a lot you're going to get out of that, Mr. Mayor, and certainly along with Mr. Bartlett, it's something that's very, very important to this council. So I wish you both the very best in it. Gives you a great opportunity to potentially champion the cause for our local government area.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. Do I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against this motion? Councillor Moses, the second of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Being no further debate, then I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Right.
Against? Declare that motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. We'll now move on to item 14, reports to committees. Item 14.1 is the Audit Committee meeting minutes that were held on the 21st of March 2023. And our elected member representative is Councillor MacArthur on the Audit Committee. So I might like to offer the opportunity for Councillor MacArthur if she'd like to move that they be true and correct record. Thank you, Councillor MacArthur, seconded by Councillor McGrath. Councillor MacArthur, as that move of the motion, do you wish to speak at all?
Self-explanatory. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any elected members who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor McGrath, as the second of the motion, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Being the case, then I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. There are no delegates' reports for our April ordinary meeting, so we'll move straight into item number 16, which is question on notice. And that question on notice was submitted by Councillor Fuller, and in her absence, I will read out her question on notice to the organisation. That council note, apologies, her question on notice is Gunnedah swimming pool where are we at with the continued leaking of water? And now I'll hand to Mr. Bartlett to give a response to the question on notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is for council to consider the response provided to Councillor Fuller's question on notice regarding the Gunnedah Memorial Pool. The response to the question on notice is that the matter is ongoing and is being dealt with under advice from councillor solicitors. Council has continued to explore a resolution with the contractors involved, but council has nonetheless reserved its rights to commence proceedings in the event a resolution cannot be reached.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett, for preparation of that report to the council meeting. Councillors, we're now moving into an area of closed reports. There are two, and I will ask the question, are there reasons why anyone believes these items should not be determined in closed council? Then next, I would please request that a councillor move a motion that we go into closed meeting to discuss the reports in closed of confidential nature. Thank you, Councillor Moses, seconded by Councillor Hook. And I'll now put that motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. So now, just to let those who will be listening to this recording know, we're moving into closed council. And the reason for that is we'll be discussing items of a confidential nature. So we'll be suspending our taping of the audio. And once it's complete, I'll be coming back and reading out the responses or the resolutions, I should say, of closed council. And also, I would like the record to show that all of those who should not be in the chamber, being those who are visitors or those staff members who are not part of the executive, have removed themselves from the chamber for this closed section of council. So we'll now suspend or turn off the audio. Just confirmation that we have resumed our audio taping of the April ordinary meeting now that we've resumed our standing orders back into standing council meeting. And I'd now like to read out the resolutions of the two items that were dealt with in closed meeting of council. The first item being item 17.1. We have a resolution that reads in three parts. First part, the council receive and note the update on the Gunnedah Koala Sanctuary. Second part, that council delegate authority to the general manager to approve all variations to tender SPT 602122 GUN for any additional works completed to construct the Gunnedah Koala Sanctuary stage scope, provided that the overall project value remains within the approved council adopted budget for the project. And the third part, capping the value of the variation to the value or the preliminary estimates on the cost of the proposed changes as detailed in the report. And the next item dealt with in closed council was item 18.1, which was tender T222308, Gunnedah Poultry Precinct Activation Project Delegated Authority to accept tender. The resolution of closed council reads in two parts. First part, the council endorsed departure from convention of reporting to council as identified in the procurement and tendering framework on this occasion, in order to allow the general manager to accept a tender for tender T222308, Gunnedah Poultry Precinct Activation Project under delegated authority. And two, that the general manager be authorised to negotiate and execute resulting contracts on behalf of council. That being the two items that were dealt with in closed meeting of council. Now gives me pleasure to declare our April ordinary meeting of council closed at 6:03.